2006. And it's amazing to see a lot of familiar faces on this call today. It's great to see everybody. I was part of the 2008-2009 McNair cohort and had also been involved in other TRIO programs and SSS programs on campus. So I will start with that as my introductions and want to thank everybody again for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mapu. Dr. Boxer.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Again, it's good to see all of these friendly WSU faces, and those who are students, and then those who are alumni of WSU. I attended WSU in the fall of 1997 as a freshman, and then graduated after my McNair experience in the summer of 2002. After that, I went on to the Ethnic Studies program at UC Berkeley, and I earned my master's degree there and then my PhD at Berkeley. Currently, I am an associate professor of Native American and Indigenous Studies, and I'm at Fort Lewis College, located in Durango, Colorado. I would like to just add that Fort Lewis College is a Native serving institution. We have a student body population of 41% Native American students, along with about another 10% of Latino, Chicano Latino, and African American students, which makes us really a minority student serving institution, minority majority. So it's been a pleasure to be at Fort Lewis College to really take what I learned at WSU and the desire I had to see more professors of color in my undergrad experience, but to be that person for my students and to diversify the professoriate. So I've been here for 13 years, and so it's always great for me to connect again to WSU and to remember those years. Like 20 years ago, it's hard to believe that we'll be coming upon that shortly. So thank you all. Thank you, Ray, for organizing this. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us. Dr. Mendez.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. My name is Sylvia Mendez. I'm a professor and chair of the Department of Leadership Research and Foundations in the College of Education at the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, so not too far from Durango. My research centers on the creation of optimal higher education policies and practices that advance faculty careers, as well as student success. And I also do research around the schooling experiences of Mexican descent youth in the mid-20th century, which really was inspired by my father's family background, his own experiences in schools, as well as his parents' experiences in schools. I graduated from WSU 20 years ago this spring, so in 2001, with a bachelor's in economics, and I was a member of the inaugural McNair cohort, so I was able to participate in both my junior and senior year there.
Man, you say it was 20 years ago. Oh my goodness.
Am I aging you?
I think that's already happened, but yeah. So this is, the culmination, this meeting, the four of us, of many folks who have had a hand in bringing TRIO to WSU moving into the TRIO community. Reflecting back on your time at WSU, do you want to share what it was like in those days, maybe? How you got interested in TRIO, McNair, SSS, and so forth? Was there someone, a catalyst for you, who helped move you in, to this community of support? And anyone can start.
I can start. I think I saw her face come across the screen, Lucy Loetta. Certainly introduced me to the idea of McNair. I think it's our first TRIO program, so there were not other programs to be a part of. And I just trusted Lucy. She said, you should do it. I said, okay, let me apply and see what happens. And it definitely changed my life. I don't think I would be a professor if it weren't for the McNair program. and the mentorship that was provided, both within McNair through the staff and my faculty mentor, but also the mentorship that I received through being an active participant in the Chicano Latino Center, as well as the Asian American Pacific Islander Center, and then even thinking about the Multicultural Student Mentors Program. All of that helped to create a community for me at WSU, and I think it led me to the McNair program.
I'll go ahead and follow Sylvia. I think for me, there was just a natural activism going on amongst the students at the various centers. I want to acknowledge that Manuel Acevedo was pivotal in that. I remember attending chairs meetings with him, I think bi-weekly, and there was just a good cohort of students across the centers that were very active. Somewhere along the line, my major was at the time comparative American cultures. It's comparative ethnic studies now. But having a great graduate teaching assistant, being active at the Native American Center, and then hearing and getting word about the McNair program through my sister, and then a friend of ours, Melanie, at the time. So the three of us interviewed with Nancy Schmidt. And so we're accepted into the program. And, I think in my junior year, I was thinking about graduate school, as a continuation of my own studies. And then it was just the right people talking to you, mentoring you, and then a program that would lay out for you how to get into graduate school was really helpful. So all of those things came together for it to be where I found myself, applying to Berkeley, getting accepted, and then going through my own program. So definitely acknowledge all of the work that students were doing, that our graduate student instructors were doing, and of course our faculty who inspired me to continue on beyond WSU.
All right, so I will take the next lead on that. So I had been involved in a few organizations and clubs on campus with the Multicultural Student Services, particularly those within the AAPI Center. And it was actually through many of those connections when I had learned about the McNair program. And my sister, who was also a WSU alumnus, also had heard about the McNair Scholar, but given her pathways in pharmacy, she ultimately went a different path and had encouraged me to look into the McNair program. And it's at that time when I started learning about the McNair program, and I always knew and had a dream of being a doctor. And as a first generation college student, I didn't realize how many opportunities there were as a doctor. And the McNair program really helped to open my eyes and see these various opportunities. And so even today, when I look back and think back on a lot of my fond memories at WSU, I think of my connections that were made during the McNair program. I can still recall every single person who was in our cohort, the 2-year program, and am still connected in some way. And think about our nights at Leidy when we were studying, our summers preparing for the GRE program, our conference, the McNair conference at Wisconsin that we spent together. All of these relationships that were formed are really what are sentimental to me and really what guided me in the process of the McNair program, and what I think stands out most to me. The relationships that were created with mentors in the process also stand out. I still look to many of these mentors today. Dr. Herrera will advocate for these types of relationships as well, which are so important in the process. Even to this day, I look to Dr. Herrera as I make some big academic decisions. And so these are the types of relationships that will really help to inform your passions and who you are. And that's really what stands out to me most, is the relationships, the connections, the mentorship that was received from WSU and the McNair program.
Excellent. So thinking back about your time in McNair, transitioning into graduate school, were there certain things that stand out to you about that transition?
I think I'm happy to go first on this one. It was actually through my relationships that I had formed during the McNair program that ultimately encouraged me to pursue my master's from counseling psychology at Washington State University, and then transitioned on to my doctorate in public health from the University of Hawaii at Mānoa. And just thinking about the cohort relationship that was formed during McNair, that really helped to create that sense of cohortness for my graduate program. And that sense of moving together is really what helped to allow me to succeed in not just McNair, but the graduate programs, and knowing that we're moving together in the processes, whether it be a qualifying exam or a qualifying paper, proposal, or dissertation, just knowing that I was going through that process with my cohort was very similar to going through the McNair process, and how that really helped to set the tone and process for that. I think one of the things I will always remember transitioning and applying to graduate programs is a piece of advice I actually got from McNair is in the interview process, you're not the only one being interviewed. You're also interviewing these programs. And so that was something that still stands out to me even until today. And even thinking about interviewing for like academic positions, you're also interviewing these programs. And so that is so important, so that when you start the program, you kind of know what you're getting yourself into, what the faculty are like, what their research interests are. And so that also helps with the transition, I believe, from that undergraduate to graduate process.
I'll go ahead next. So going back to your question, Ray, about that transition from undergrad to graduate, I think the takeaway I had is that McNair, for me, I remember being told to find a faculty mentor, and so that was an important part of the McNair process. And it forced me, who's naturally, a quiet student who did well, so I wouldn't necessarily go to my professors outside of class to talk about class stuff. So it really, the activity of finding a faculty mentor was good and instrumental for me. It gave me confidence to see faculty as mentors and to, search someone out whose research aligned with your own interests. And that same tactic, that same idea should apply to graduate school. So I searched programs where Native faculty doing research in the area that aligned with my interests. And it, worked where at, UC Berkeley, I found a faculty mentor in my professor. And so that would be the one transition that I even now think back to, because I wouldn't naturally know how to ask someone to be a mentor, to seek out mentorship, even when I was junior faculty, going and looking for senior faculty to mentor me. So it's a skill that's important, especially for students who, like myself, are quiet, reserved maybe in the classroom, but are really just, go-getters and just need that additional push to talk to a faculty member, someone that I wouldn't have approached otherwise.
For me, in thinking about graduate school, I was in economics and I loved the field of economics, but I was an overly active student. So my mentors at WSU were like, what are you doing in economics? Do you know there's this thing called student affairs in higher education? And if anyone remembers Kyle, who was the director of the AAPI Center, he had went to Colorado State University for his master's degree. And he was like, that's the place for you. You should go there. So I ended up applying, and that's actually the only place I applied and got in, which is wonderful. And there were just so many opportunities. It reminded me a lot of my experience at WSU with faculty who really cared about students and wanted to see them succeed. They also had a high first-generation population. So we're very invested in increasing those opportunities for those students. And then when it went on to think about my PhD, I think I was a little bit more savvy and realized I need to do my own research and decide where's the right place for me. And I did end up at the University of Kansas, where I earned a PhD in Ed Leadership and Policy Studies. And I think my graduate education and what made it so important is the mentoring piece that I received by my faculty advisors. My master's advisor still comes and does some guest speaking in one of my classes. And my doctoral advisor and I still write together pretty regularly. And so those folks have been integral in my process. And although I wasn't so mindful of that for my master's program, even though McNair told me I should be, it worked out so well. And I'm really thankful for those opportunities.
Excellent. So as you're moving through McNair, we do talk a lot about that transition from undergrad to grad. But what we don't get to hear a lot about is that transition from grad school into the faculty ranks. Illuminate for us what that was like for you.
I'll go ahead and start this one. So the transition from graduate school into my first faculty position, I did teach 1 year at the University of Montana as a visiting instructor. I was hired as a sabbatical replacement. So even as a graduate student, I was getting hands-on experience teaching. I think as a new faculty member then when I was hired here at Fort Lewis in the tenure track position, I, in hindsight, realized that I didn't have a lot of protections from senior faculty I'm talking about in the area of service. So it was exciting to be new faculty member, you know, a Native woman, a woman of color, and to be asked to participate in all of these different things on campus, and that there was a great need for someone like myself to, you know, be an advisor to a student group, to sit on this committee, and again, not having a senior faculty member strongly advocate on my behalf, you know, I did get involved too heavily in service. So I think that's something of an advice to give to new faculty is to really protect your time and to be mindful that service will always be there for you. It's the never ending story of being at an institution. There's tons of committee work, but to be really picky and choosy about what you do spend your time on. You know, there are some things you have to do as part of a faculty in a department, but it's that external pressure to be on everything, especially as like I said, a faculty of color to do that. So that was the transition is, you know, I was very enthusiastic, very excited to be at Fort Lewis. And then in hindsight, I realized I did a lot of service, and I, you know, would recommend for everyone just to protect your time and to be slow to jump on board with committee work, and as much as you can to balance that with the rest of what you do, you know, your own research, your own teaching.
So my transition, I've been here at UCCS for 13 years now. So it is my only real job I've ever had. So I really don't know what it would look like any differently. But I felt really well prepared for the work that was in front of me because of my doctoral advisor, who was really hands-on in the whole process of applying. And so when I ultimately chose to come to UCCS, it was done very methodically and purposefully. I had a young family at the time. I had a daughter. And I knew I wanted to have more children. So I was really purposeful in thinking about going to an institution where I was going to be able to have some harmony in my life. Definitely not balance, but some harmony in enjoying the teaching, research, and the service. And I was very mindful from the beginning to think about how to have some synchronicity in the work that I'm doing. So how is my teaching, research, and service really come together in meaningful ways? And how can I make contributions to the field in those ways? So I really have to thank my doctoral advisor for keeping me very mindful early on about what would be the right fit for me. Like Dr. Antonio said, it is about thinking about yourself in this process. You know that you're going to contribute wherever you go, but you want to be mindful about what's the right institution for you.
All right, thank you to our panelists who got this started. To just kind of piggyback off of what has already been shared. In terms of the transition, I think I was very fortunate and blessed for my pathways and how it kind of always aligned with one another. And, you know, my work continuously built off of each other. It kind of worked out nicely for me in that when I was a graduate student, a doctoral student at the University of Hawaii, I had also been a research assistant at the Department of Native Hawaiian Health, but also had some great teaching and research experience that had started from WSU, even from like the McNair program, and then building upon that for my master's program and building upon that for my doctoral program, so that when I had graduated, I entered a tenure track position with our community college. And that was as a result of some of the teaching experience that I had received. It was during that time when a position had opened, the current position that I'm in, that was kind of spearheading this Native Hawaiian and Indigenous health program that was a result of community requests, as a result of just various entities coming together and demonstrating the strong need to address Native Hawaiian health in the University of Hawaii, which is a Native Hawaiian Serving Institute. The irony of that is that we only have about 4% faculty who are Native Hawaiian on campus. And so that service aspect is very real, especially if you have increased student representation of Native Hawaiians and Pacific peoples and Indigenous peoples who are wanting to gain experience in this field, but don't have a lot of mentors to look forward or look toward because of that limited faculty representation. And so some of the things that really helped in that transition to the current position that I'm in, which again is also a unique position given that it's a cluster hire. So as you heard in my introduction, it's in 2 departments. So when a person goes for tenure in a cluster hire position, they're going under 2 departments in 2 schools, right? So that you can think about what that means for Native Hawaiian faculty who are hired through this mechanism in an effort of trying to increase representation across departments, but the difficulty and challenges of receiving tenure in 2 departments. With that though, I think the biggest takeaway that I've learned is learning to say yes, to say no, and learning the art and the science of saying yes so that later you can say no. And when I say that, what I mean is you over time start to agree to participate in things, whether it be at the department level or the university level or in various areas. And when you reach a point where you're at maximum capacity, you can start to ask even your department, you're asking me to do this, but you've also asked me to do X, Y, and Z. How would you recommend I prioritize that? Right? And so you really start to learn that art of saying, how am I going to protect myself if I'm being asked to do these multiple demands? And so that was the biggest thing that helped in that transition with the demands increasing for teaching, research, and service. And so that was one of the greatest things that I've learned through that transition process.
Thank you so much. This is very enlightening. I'm hoping our from McNair current scholars who are on the Zoom today are picking up on a lot of this stuff, because we can share with them about that initial transition, but that second one that next large leap is something that, you know, they could really use your advice on. So thank you so much. I do want to invite our participants, you know, today to go ahead and put questions in the chat. We're going to go ahead and monitor those and ask those, or go ahead and move to those in a few minutes here. So panelists, you're there. You become faculty. We're always so proud of you. We talk about you a lot, all the time. And so you're there now. So what is that like? We haven't been able to connect as much as we had hoped to over the years, but I do get, you know, updates from time to time. So tell us, you know, about life as a faculty member, you know, the good, the bad, and maybe not so good. So share, spill the tea, as they say.
Well, I really love my life as a faculty member. I have the opportunity every day to help people reach their dream of earning a college degree. Commencement is always one of my favorite times of the year to see the person who didn't maybe believe in themselves or struggled in a course walk across that stage is really gratifying and satisfying to me. I also appreciate the fact that I have so much research autonomy. I get to research exactly what I'm interested in. No one gets to tell me you should research this or this or this. And so that is also keeps, I think, me energized in the work that I do. I currently lead the social science research on 2 grants funded by the National Science Foundation that are designed to diversify the professoriate, particularly in engineering. And that is just a lot of fun to get to work with engineers from across the country and thinking about ways that we can increase access and opportunity for historically marginalized groups. So that's really exciting. What's also nice is that it's conducive to my primary role of being a mother. I have a 10 and 15-year-old now. And I have a lot of flexibility. I get to decide what I'm going to teach, when I'm going to teach, when I'm going to conduct my research, what kinds of service that I'm willing to get involved in. And that allows me a lot of, like I said, harmony in my life. I think what I'm struggling with right now is the burden that the pandemic is putting on students. And a lot of just uncertainty about when we're going to get back to life as normal. Will we get back to life as normal? And so helping them navigate that and reassuring them is what I feel like I spend most of my time doing right now.
Okay, I'm happy to go next. So, in thinking about my current position, I think I would have to echo what was just shared in the sense that I love being a faculty member. I love the work that I do. And, you know, I actually had the opportunity to gather with other junior faculty who had very similar interests in my first year in this position. And that for me was a very powerful gathering so that we could really discuss our research together, but some of the challenges. And it was actually as a result of this junior faculty seminar when we ultimately decided how many jobs can you have where you can truly advocate what you believe in an academic setting, where you can really influence people like students who have very similar upbringings or very similar values, and how often do we get to actually make this kind of mechanism of change? And so with that, I absolutely love the position that I'm in. And in fact, part of the reason why I'm in this position today is because of my community, my Native Hawaiian community and other communities at large who have very similar narratives and wanting to be a part of the narrative change for our communities. And so a little bit about the Native Hawaiian Indigenous Health Program, which is the program that I've mentioned a couple of times. The main essence of this program, and this is the first in the nation to be established where students receive a Master of Public Health as a result of this program. This program was established to address health disparities of Native Hawaiians and Indigenous people through the addressing of determinants of health, which is like, you know, economic factors, social factors, political factors. And in this position, I've always said that I will continue to remain here to help put the pebbles in the pond so that our next generations can continue this legacy and this work. It's either that or we've met our main mission of eliminating health disparities, in which case I'm more than happy with the work that has been done and will go home and be okay with that. But it's through these opportunities as a faculty member in which we can really be a part of this mechanism of change, which I've truly loved and appreciated. There is more autonomy in the way in which we do research. So part of my research is reconstructing the way we think about health and resilience so that it can align more with Native Hawaiian ways of knowing. And it's not many job opportunities where you can actually be paid to do something that you truly love and you're truly passionate about. And so with that though comes, of course, as Dr. Herrera mentioned, some challenges. And some of that can be just wanting to prevent burnout, because with a lot of this work, there comes a lot of demands. And so one of the biggest things is to keep in mind in the process is ensuring that you are building some boundaries and allowing that work-life balance so that you prevent burnout in the process. And so what I've learned in this process is I'm really advocating for Native Hawaiian health, being alongside my community while engaging in the academic world, having my family support in that process, attending to my family in that process, and just really understanding that that's who I am holistically. And so with that, I've absolutely loved this opportunity to serve as a faculty member.
Right. So my thoughts on, just life as a faculty member. For me, it's really grounded in my teaching, and I enjoy that I get to know my students outside of class and to really be part of their lives in ways that I didn't necessarily have when I was an undergrad. I think being at a small liberal arts college, is really conducive to forming those relationships. One thing that I want to add is just, as a faculty member, I'm constantly interested in many things beyond just my current research project or the research that I'm doing. I'm always wanting to be a student and to learn from others. And I think that really is grounding. It keeps me engaged with my work and then my life outside of work. Even in all of the demands that I have upon my time, I still prioritize my own interests and things that make that are culturally grounding to me. So I work on my bead work. I go home in the summer times, and so both spoke about just the autonomy and the freedom that we have as faculty members. That extends also to the summer months, and for myself, it's important that I go home every summer to Montana, that I connect with my family and participate in my own community events that they're having, and really just be a member of that community. So for me, my life is that. It's kind of weird where I feel like I live in Durango and I work here, but I really call home Montana. And, that's where my people and my reservation is. It brings me back every summer. And so that's just kind of, just that life you live as faculty. You're back and forth between different spaces. And for me, my community is the way that I keep myself grounded.
Thank you so much. Staying on this theme of life as a faculty member, I do want to take a question from one of the participants, Dr. Laura Hill. She asks, do you ever feel the imposter syndrome? If yes, how do you manage it? I know we talk about that at some length during McNair and as you're in graduate school, but now as faculty, is it still there?
I'm happy to get this question started because this is actually a topic of conversation that comes up surprisingly more often than not. And I think I actually had imposter syndrome for even applying for the position that I'm in, and that sense of, well, the what ifs and the should I really go for it because of X, Y, and Z. And it was when I put my full trust, I gave it a lot of thought, I gave it a lot of consultation with mentors when I realized that if I don't go for this, who will? And wanting to ensure that this really was a success. And it's in these moments and times when I feel the imposter syndrome, because the imposter syndrome is very real, right? That sense of like questioning of, do I truly belong, or am I really worthy enough of this position or this type of work? That's kind of like that imposter syndrome. And so when I think about, or when I get to a moment where I experience some of this imposter syndrome, it's so helpful to have that network around you. To really guide you and support you and remind you of the work that you're doing. And for me, that has really guided me and really kept me encouraged for the work that I'm really passionate about in these times of feeling imposter syndrome. And what I found is it's actually experienced by some of our students as well. And it's when we open these types of conversations and discussions with our undergraduate, our graduate students, when we can start to address that imposter syndrome at multiple levels so that we understand it, understand and recognize that we deserve to be here, and we deserve to be in these spaces, and we should be in these spaces. And how do we continue forward with that momentum, guiding each other along the way so that we can kind of uplift each other in the process. And so that's what I like to turn to when I'm feeling that sense of imposter syndrome.
Certainly, I experience imposter syndrome. So part of faculty life is inviting criticism at every moment, right? Through our teaching, when we're submitting articles, submitting grants. Our world is a lot of rejection. And so when you take rejection, it can hurt still, right? Even though you had a great idea, it was a great paper, ultimately, if it wasn't accepted, it's hard to not think, oh my gosh, should I really be doing this? Am I contributing in the ways that I think I'm contributing? But ultimately, you got to be in the game to win. And so you have to be okay with rejection in all sorts of ways. And I think just in faculty life, we are uniquely inviting criticism and rejection all the time. And so you've got to have a thick skin with it and really believe in yourself. But definitely those moments of doubt and imposter syndrome creep up for me still 13 years later. Yes.
I'm not sure if I felt that imposter syndrome in the way that both Mapuana and Sylvia have explained. I think for me, I found like a refuge, a safe place within ethnic studies. So maybe in some ways I was shielded from that since, you find communities that you belong to and that everyone, is supportive of each other. So for me, it's, about creating that space where one can feel that you belong and that you're supported in your efforts. And I think, again, just being in Native American studies, I'm kind of uniquely shielded. I know my students aren't, that they go about their days on campus and in their classes where, that they mix and have more non-natives in their classes. And, the discussions may turn on the tuition waiver that we offer here at Fort Lewis. And so just to answer that question, I've been uniquely blessed to be in these spaces of belonging and of safety. And so I understand, though, that those don't always exist elsewhere, that we have to create that. And it's why we're doing the work that we do, is because we're making that space for ourselves, but I hope also those who come behind us, and going back to the purposes of McNair and diversifying the professoriate, so that you see more folks like yourself, as fellow students, undergrads, graduates, and then of course amongst faculty.
Thank you. Thank you. So shifting somewhat more systemically to questions of support and belonging. A question from Angie Kunko, what can WSU do to support first gen and underrepresented students? That's the first part. Second part, what support do you wish you would have had during grad school?
Well, certainly cloning Dr. Herrera and Lucy Loetta and all of these wonderful people who I think support thousands of students now, if you think about your time at WSU, are really integral. So when I'm hiring faculty, I'm always really interested in what are the ways that they want to contribute to our community. And so I always think about folks like Lucy and Raymond, who really in many ways have dedicated their lives to helping others. And those are the kinds of faculty and staff that I want us to hire at our university. So that's really important to me. When I think about my own grad experience, I really had a great experience. I don't know how I would change anything. Certainly I was too naive to know, like, maybe I should have had this or that during the time. But even upon reflecting, it really was a great experience. I connected to wonderful people very early on who were also committed to my success and were willing to invest that time and energy. So I think when for McNair students who are thinking about graduate school, it's really important to figure out what's the right place for you. And if there are faculty who really can give of their time and energy in the way that's going to help you both professionally, but also personally grow and develop.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Okay, I'll continue. Just to dovetail with what Sylvia was saying, I think for me at WSU, it really was just the friendships that I had, the caring faculty and staff that I had come across, the co-curricular activities, so being part of a student group on campus really was helpful and instrumental in kind of creating that sense of belonging. And then of course, the McNair program itself. As a graduate student, it was much of the same, like I had mentioned, being in this ethnic studies space. I had a great cohort at Berkeley and great professors. So it's just more of that, and keeping it sustained, to have these trio programs, to have spaces like the Native American Center, where students can just informally build those friendships and relationships. So that's what sustained me through my years at WSU, and definitely through my time at Berkeley. And even now with my students, I help and give service when I can, and get to know them outside the classroom. And that's something that's very organic. I don't think there's one formula that one can prescribe that would, say you do this and you're guaranteed success. But it's in the little finer details, these relationships, and that relationships take time to build, both academic and outside the classroom, and among students, and then with their faculty and their staff that they interact with.
And along those lines, I can sincerely say that WSU actually has a lot of resources available that I was very privileged and fortunate to receive through TRIO, through McNair, through MSS. And so I think if there was one thing I would say, it's continuing and sustaining the efforts that are available to first generation college students, I truly believe a lot of my success is a result of these programs and the mentorships and the relationships that were formed through these opportunities. And so if there was one thing I could wish, it would be simply wishing that everyone had access to these opportunities as well, so that we could really make a large impact in those who could really benefit from these services, from these programs, to these opportunities. And so to also answer the question of those freshmen and students who might be on today's Zoom, go for it, because I've been so encouraged by the supportive team, by the dedicated team who really wants to see your success. And so if you're in that questioning of whether it's nervousness or excitement, certainly go for it. Put yourself out there and apply. You can say you gave it your best shot. And in that process, then learn about yourself, if anything, through that process.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we're getting close to the end of our time today, sadly. I do want to give each of you an opportunity to share some final thoughts with us before we close out today's panel.
I can start us off. I guess I want to leave us with thinking about why it's important to diversify the professoriate. When I think about my own educational experience, I didn't have very many diverse faces in front of the classroom. And the few that I had, I connected with them and they made a difference. When I think about my 10 years of college, I only had one African-American professor. I only had one Indigenous professor, a handful of Asian American professors, but it wasn't very diverse. And I think it matters to increase those kinds of faces in front of the classroom. I also think it matters to have more people researching topics that are important to communities of color in our country. And not that everyone who researches those topics come from diverse backgrounds, but certainly that's been my experience, and that's where the passion really comes from this work. And then when I just think about it for pragmatic reasons, if we don't engage everyone in giving of their talents and their experiences, it really is a loss for our society. And unfortunately, historically to today, we have denied and excluded opportunities for certain groups of people. We have not supported, challenged, or inspired them to really contribute in the way that they can, and which is why I'm interested and still do work in education, because I think it's so important. I think it's where we realize the truth, the soul of our country. And so I'm really dedicated to thinking about the ways that we can continue to diversify the professoriate, but also improve the experiences for all students.
My final thoughts, I'm thinking of the chat where it was noted that there are a couple of freshmen here on the Zoom call, and even current students, current undergrads. My advice or my final thoughts would be to reach out to anyone who crosses your path, especially your faculty members, to not be like me and be a shy student and wait until McNair tells you you have to find a faculty mentor, like do that on your own. And I'll tell you, as a faculty member, I love to hear from my students, even a quick email introducing yourself. It helps me, put a face to a name and get to know you as a student much better. And same thing, my final thoughts is to be involved as a student with all the WSU has to offer. I was in marching band, which, totally unrelated, to my field of study, but it was a carryover from my high school years. And there were just some great experiences that I had and that you'll have if you extend yourself and go beyond your own comfort zone. So that would be my advice and kind of my final thoughts. And that's something that applies to all areas of your life, even as a professor and faculty member, to extend yourself, to go out your comfort zone, to find peers who who can be part of that support network that you build for yourself.
And I will try to summarize or sum up some of my final thoughts in about a minute. The first thing I just want to reiterate and remind everybody of is to ask questions, but do your homework. So doing your homework helps, but also don't be afraid to ask questions along the way. Sometimes it can feel intimidating to reach out to a faculty member, but don't allow yourself to say no for them. Reach out and make that relationship and develop that mentorship in the process. And with that, then the second thing I want to leave is don't forget about the people and the experiences that have shaped who you are as a person, especially in the trying times. That is what's going to keep you motivated and passionate about the work that you do. And the last thing then is the saying of it's a kako thing. Kako in our understanding is this collective we, and this understanding that to do this work together, the work of McNair, the work of TRIO, the work of impacting this type of field, this work, it's a kako thing, meaning it's going to take everyone on this call, including myself, including you, to really continue this work and keep it sustained over time. And mahalo nui again. Thank you everyone for this opportunity and for being on the call today.
Well, thank you all so much. That was wonderful. My heart is so full right now. As I mentioned to you earlier, I think about you all the time. I talk about you all the time, brag about you a lot. So to have the three of you come back and join us for this special panel during our TRIO Week celebrations here at WSU is so special. And always know that you have a home here too at WSU. That's our final jewel in the crown for McNair's, to have one of our alums come back to WSU as a faculty member. So keep a lookout at WSU Jobs. We want somebody back here. Thank you all for attending. I do have just a couple of announcements really quick. If I could share this screen. We have some other events happening this week for National TRIO Works. If you go to first at wsu.edu, there's some cool listings here for events that are coming up. And I wouldn't be doing my job if I wasn't pushing McNair. So for you students who are on the call today, or faculty staff who are joining us as well, the McNair application is now open. So go ahead and apply yourself, or refer folks to go ahead and apply. We do have a request to take a group shot here. So Hildy, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over, or back to you to lead us in that. Let us know what you need from us, or how we're going to do that.
Oh, okay. We can do we want to do one with the panelists, or a group shot?
Let's do two.
Two.
One panelist and then one.
Okay, we can do the first one for panelists. So ready? 1, 2, 3, and smile. Oh, wait, one more time. 1, 2, 3, smile. Alrighty, got that. And then let me remove all the spotlights and we can do a gallery view. And if anyone wants to start their video, we can do a full gallery view and then show lots of different faces. I'll give you a second if anyone wants to join the group shot. Okay, and I think I see a whole bunch of wonderful faces. So we're gonna do another countdown. So 1, 2, 3, and smile. Awesome, looks good. Does anyone want a second one, or we're good with that one?
I think we're good. Thank you all for joining us today. Quick shout out to Dr. Steve Burkett, our McNair godfather. He brought it here. He wasn't able to join us today, but I recorded so I could send this on to him. So thanks everyone for joining us. Have a wonderful TRIO Tuesday, and we'll see you soon.
Thank
Yep, sure it
everyone.
works.
you. Right. Hey, Tremaine. Glad you joined us.
Hi.
I can end the meeting now if y'all want.
Thanks, Hildy. That was awesome.
But Ray, we're gonna have a couple of our students do a thank you video for the presenters. So can you make sure that Hildy has their emails and contacts?
Oh, to send to, yeah, I'll do that right now.
Okay, bye.